It is with great pleasure that I introduce our keynote speaker today. Nabil Rad, he's the Vice President of Data Science at General Motors Financial. In this capacity, Nabil leads the Department of Analytical Solutions that supports strategic and operational initiatives. Previously, Nabil was the Director of Product Development Analytics at the Ford Motor Company. Other positions held at Ford include the Director of Enterprise Risk, Director of Ford Credit's Global Business Center, Regional Risk Director for Asia Pacific and Africa based in Australia, actually Pricing Analytics Manager, and so on. So before joining Ford, Nabil held also various positions at Citibank and other companies, include the Vice President of Business and Technology Innovation. He was also Chief Data Officer, Head of Quality Analytics, and Head of Software Development. Nabil also has very extensive experience in the field of complex adaptive systems, where he largely focused on developing transformative strategies that shape and shift the behavior of social dynamic systems and across many disciplines. So please join me in welcoming our really distinguished keynote speakers in this keynote today. Thanks a lot, Nabil, for accepting our invitation and being with us in this Dearborn Artificial Intelligence Research Symposium. We are really honored to have you with us. So, Nabil, you'll be talking about really an exciting topic about creating this transformative data science organization, which is a topic that many of the audience actually are looking forward to it. So, Nabil, it's up to you now.
Thank you so much, Marwan, and thank you for having me. So good day, everyone, and again, thank you for the opportunity to share with you this particular topic, which is, in my view, quite critical to the practice of data science. So data science has become really an essential element in any business innovation strategy. The challenge is that many organizations fail to fully leverage analytics the right way. And from my own experience, over 60% of transformative data science initiatives fail to deliver on objectives. So this talk is based on the premise that one of the greatest challenges in developing high-performing analytics teams is managing the social system within and across the ecosystem that analytics resides in. And then there is a lot of enthusiasm from data science teams for developing solutions for other functions. However, I would argue that we have not actually used analytics the right way to improve how data science can be an engine of innovation. So this talk is about applying analytics to improve the practice of analytics. And what I will share with you is one of many experiments we conducted over a 2-year period with a large data science group of about 700 people. And so I'll talk about the methods and the analytics at a high level. And then this work is used really, again, to improve analytic practice. And I started this over 10 years ago with another company, and it was influenced by my work in research and when I was working on my PhD as well. And so we continue to evolve this work and methods, and again, we're happy to share it with you. So on next slide, in essence, we started focusing on data science as a sort of resilience well before the pandemic hit us, and it just highlighted the need for data science to be a source of innovation and resilience for many organizations. And if you look at some of what's happening in industry, Over 75% of global business ventures worldwide fail. The rolling 7-year average tenure of companies in the S&P 500 has been declining from a high of 37 years in 77 to 23 years in 2017, and it is expected to decline to 12 years by 2027. So very volatile environment. Companies are 6 times more likely to fail as compared to 40 years ago. And in essence, many organizations, almost 80 to 85% of organizations have invested heavily in data science, but only 2% recognize transformative benefits. So that's the challenge we're seeing. A key element in the organizations that have succeeded is that they focus a lot on promoting collaboration within those data science team and within those organizations. And so that'll be a key area of focus. So in essence, what we're doing here, we're saying that we do have a resilience problem in large organizations in particular. And to develop this resilience, organizations are attempting to grow their data science teams. And results are not very encouraging. A lot of companies are not happy with their investments in data science. And the failure rate is about 60%, which is obviously not acceptable. Now, one of the, again, reasons why we need to focus on this research or on this aspect of analytics is that resilience is a key problem today. And this is just very quickly, I won't go into it in a lot of detail. This is a survey that is conducted by North Carolina State University and Protiviti, and they publish every year their top 10 risk list. And in recent years, and you can see here 2018 and 2019, the common thread across all of these risks is that resilience is a problem, right? Whether you talk about the speed of disruptive innovation, the ability to use analytics for business transformation, the ability of the culture to drive change. So there is a problem of resilience that the techniques and methods that I will mention address in a very big way. And so today there is really an absence of studies and evidence from practice relative to how data science can be used as a strategic capability, in particular when it comes to actually driving organizational resilience. And so I will be introducing some topics or some keywords just to make sure we start from the right level of understanding, if you will. So one of the things we will introduce in this talk is the concept of virtual mirror. And in essence, a virtual mirror is a social network visualization of our own communications as individuals, and as teams. So the idea here being that if we are exposed and if we see our own communication patterns, our behavior will change as a result of that exposure. And so we coined a term called virtual mirroring-based learning, which is the discipline of applying different techniques to provide virtual mirrors and to drive a change in behavior toward the right level of collaboration that is needed for the organization. Resilience is the capacity of a system to actually learn and survive and adapt under severe periods of turbulence. And the other concept we are introducing is what we call resilience-based workstyles. And in essence, what those are characteristics of people who bring a certain element of resilience to a team. And in essence, what we're trying to do here is determine the different types of characteristics that are needed on a team. And this will come in probably a little bit more into focus as we get to that topic later in the discussion. And then, innovation and then collaboration, key terms, just to make sure we start from the same page. So what we'll do in this discussion, I'm going to focus on two key questions. The first one is the effectiveness of virtual mirroring-based learning, and the other one is how can you use network analysis tied to a change in behavior, and in essence be able to use network science to drive resilience in organizations. So we'll start. I'm having some problems here. We'll start with the key question here, which is, which virtual mirroring-based learning intervention is most effective in influencing change in collaborative behavior? And so just to walk you through the approach we took, we in essence conducted a baseline survey, and based on that survey we analyzed the data and we created interventions. We implemented those interventions, we implemented them, we monitored the environment for any changes that could impact the experiment, and then we conducted another survey, and then we analyzed the results of those surveys. So in more detail, here's what we did. We started with a survey that asked participants three key questions. Who do you connect with for innovation? Who do you connect with for project work because you work together on the same project? And who do you connect with for expertise? Also in these surveys, we provided a set of questions that help us measure how individuals work from a resilience point of view. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And there were some other attributes, region, salary, where people work, grade, etc. And so what we did, based on the survey, we established 3 virtual mirrors, which I will talk about, and then we evaluated the effectiveness of these mirrors. But the point to keep in mind here is that the survey had 2 sections. One that, in essence, helped us develop the network of individuals and how they connect with each other. And the other one are questions about work styles. And so what we've done there is use factor analysis to try to understand what are the concepts that we can derive from these questions about resilience. So let us focus a little bit initially on the virtual mirroring-based learning interventions. The first one, what we did, we basically had a group A be exposed to intervention 1, which is a static network. And in that network, we gave them a view of their own metrics. Who do they connect with? Some basic social network measures of centrality, of how they connect with each other. And then we gave them metrics about their peers, and then metrics of those individuals at a level up from them. This was sent to them via email, very easy and very quick to understand. It basically gave them a comparative view of where they stood. Obviously, it's very static, so that's the limitation. But the pro is that it's a very easy picture for them to understand. The next intervention was a dynamic network simulation. And in this case, we used a simulation to basically not only give them the same metrics that we gave them in the first intervention, but we gave them a tool to run what-if analysis. And in this case, we used a combination of system dynamics modeling and an AI techniques to basically forecast where a person's network is likely to, how it's likely to evolve. And the simulation also through AI techniques was able to tell them what will happen to that network over time and whether there are some points of failure in that network. So in other words, if you take one node from that network, what does it do to its robustness? And in the process, we were able to provide a measure of influence that that individual would either have or not based on how their personal networks will actually evolve. Now, the key here to remember is that this was an application. It's actually a little bit complex. You need to train people on how to use it. So obviously the adoption rate of the simulator is a little bit lower than what you would see, for example, in the first intervention. And then the third intervention was based on taking a person's email data, their team messaging data, and providing them with a network of their interactions over several months. And so this was a live feed, giving them real-time data from their own communication applications and giving them the ability to inspect and learn from that interaction. And it gave them metrics such as how long it takes them to reply to a person. So they could look at a particular node and say, well, for this node, it takes me about, on average, 2 minutes to respond. But for this node, it takes me on average about a week to respond. So the question is why? So again, this is a self-reflective tool that allows different people to be treated to different interventions. So in essence, we had 3 treatment groups and then 1 control group, obviously, to help us measure the effect. And so what we saw in the results is that if you look at the static dashboard, we have seen people actually, after 1 year, improve, in particular in the expertise network, improve their centrality. They became more influential and more important in the network. However, if you then filter the results based on those who have actually spent between 30 and 60 minutes using the tools, then the simulation becomes more dominant. And so those who have invested time and effort in using the simulation, they actually were able to benefit more even in terms of their centrality and their influence in the network than those who were using the static dashboard. And then those who used the tool weekly over the 1 year period, basically they were able to change their behavior in a much more powerful way because of that consistent exposure day in, day out. So there is always this kind of feedback loop mechanism telling them how their interaction and how their communication is impacting their influence and their ability to connect with others. And then obviously I'm sharing here some selected information, but one interesting finding from this particular work is that those individuals who have, if you look at this graph rather, it's actually organized by level in the organization. So those who let's say either at the manager, the director, VP, SVP level, they are to your left of the screen, and then going down levels in the organization. And here we're measuring the effective size, which is the ability of a particular individual to connect multiple people who are not yet connected, right? So the higher the effective size means the higher the ability of that individual to connect multiple people who are not currently connected. And so as you can see in this particular case, those individuals who are in higher levels in the organization have a higher level of effectiveness. So they're able to influence more. And this led, in this particular case, to work to help improve the effective size of a lot of data scientists so that they became more influential in the process. So that was the first section of this analysis or this work. The next one, we talk about resilience. And then the question here is, again, how can you take a concept of resilience and make it operational using network science? And to do that, we went and borrowed a concept from ecology called the adaptive cycle. And the adaptive cycle says that every system in life, whether it's a forest or a lake or an organization, it follows a particular path in its adaptation over time. And basically, each system passes through 4 phases. The first phase is exploitation. So imagine a piece of land that we want to cultivate. At the very beginning, it doesn't have any vegetation in it. So as you exploit it and start planting trees and fruits and different plants in it, it starts to grow. And then as it grows, this vegetation over time grows, it becomes dense. Some vegetation takes over other vegetation, and all of a sudden you have a very dense and almost inflexible system. And that's what we call the conservation phase. Think about the conservation phase as similar to companies that have grown and they became very bureaucratic, and in the face of change, they find it hard to actually adjust. Now, imagine that this is a forest that's become very dense. If there is a fire, even a small fire, it tends to destroy the whole area. And so there is this concept of a release, which is, it's a phase of destruction that every company goes through. And then the question here is whether this phase of destruction is actually planned or being reacted to. And so that's what we call the release phase. And then the next one is the reorganization phase. So it's a phase where many ideas come to be discussed. And then the question becomes, how can you take 1 or 2 ideas and then use them as fuel for the next cycle so you can exploit them? And in this cycle, there are 2 key traps. The first trap is the rigidity trap, which is you're stuck in this inflexible structure and you're unable to effect change and really trigger destruction in a planned way. And then the other one is the the poverty trap, which is you end up having way too many ideas and you're stuck in the ideation phase and you never actually take them to a practical stage where they are developed. So that's really kind of a quick overview of the adaptive cycle. Each phase of the adaptive cycle can be mapped to a specific network structure, whether the connections are strong, whether there's a central actor working in that particular structure. And so what we did, we ended up saying, okay, well, based on the answers that we have received on that initial survey, we were able to use factor analysis to basically classify people's responses as falling under one of 4 key phases of that adaptive cycle. And so the definition of resilience in this case is the ability of a team or the ability of an organization to actually migrate through that adaptive cycle with the least amount of friction. And basically that means in any team, you need to have the right mix of individuals that represent someone who is a grower, which is someone who brings people together and is able to take ideas and turn them into a product, to turn them into value for the business. And then you need the developers. Those are the people who actually focus on creating efficiencies. So they focus on process discipline, they focus on repeatability, they focus on efficiency. The survivors are those individuals who love to break things. They're not satisfied with the status quo, and what they're able to do is kill existing products that are very much profitable today because they believe that they're not going to survive. And then the renewers are those individuals who basically love to generate ideas. They don't want to be held responsible for results, but they love to generate meaningful and innovative ideas. And then it's the turn of the grower to actually take those ideas and then take them into the next phase. So that's how this is working. And so what we needed to do is make sure that now we are able to connect these four concepts to actual network metrics. And so what we did some cluster analysis to try to understand how we can cluster individuals in the best way. And we ended up, in this case, there were other clusters as well, but in this case, we ended up with three key clusters. One, those who like to grow, those who like to renew, but also grow at the same time, and those who are really more focused on surviving and really coming up with ways to destroy things and then to grow again. And so one example that I can share with you here is, this is a graph of different teams within analytics. So you can have different groups. Some are focused more on data engineering. Some are focused on developing machine learning pipelines. Others are doing research. Others could be working specifically with customers on particular implementation. And so what we've seen is that we were able to basically analyze and understand the characteristics and orientation of these teams in terms of what is the makeup from a grow or renew grow or basically survive grow perspective. And so that gave us a window into understanding how the network is likely to evolve. So in this case, between the first survey and the second survey, we've seen a shift. For example, in the initial survey, the survive and grow portion of the network, we had about 186 individuals, and basically that dropped to 141. And there were specific reasons as to why that dropped, and that's because the organization was a brand new when we did the survey about a year earlier, and then over time it matured a little bit. And then what we've seen the ability now to focus more on the growth. And so if you look at the growth factor, it grew from 84 in the first survey to 126 in the second survey. So basically what we're able to do is track and monitor the evolution of a data analytics or a data science organization as it matures. And then this graph is also very interesting because it tells us that now we're able to connect and find correlation between those concepts of resilience and actual network metrics. So in this case, remember I mentioned earlier the concept of an effective size, or the metric of effective size, which is how many people one individual is able to connect. And so we've seen a very strong statistical correlation between that metric and those different resilience characteristics. So basically, the grow cluster or the grow characteristic or work style has a higher effective size than the renew and grow. And that makes sense because the growers are people who bring people together. So they're able to connect people. These are the connectors. And then the renew grow has a lower effective size because those individuals tend to generate ideas and lead them in some times, but in other times they tend to actually follow and support others. So their networks will kind of rotate between being a connector to being a contributor. And then the survive grow, these are people who like to improvise. They tend to like to operate individually or in small groups, and then their effective size is lower. There isn't anything inherently bad or good about each of these styles. It's a question of how do you combine them together to create resilient analytics teams. And so the key takeaways from this work is that mirroring influences collaboration, and we were able to validate that and be able to trace how people act as brokers in the network. And then we were able to basically determine and demonstrate that innovation management can actually be designed and can be used as a practical tool for developing very strong and very flexible and resilient data analytics organizations. Now, obviously, in doing all of this, we wanted to make sure that we protect the data. We were using a lot of sensitive data, from emails to surveys to text messages, and so it took a while to actually get support from leaders in these organizations to actually support and have confidence in our abilities. And so initially when we started small with a few experiments. This is one of the larger experiments we conducted, but I cannot emphasize enough the importance of creating this data protection capabilities and trust in the ability to protect the data. And so this is really it. Just wanted to share with you a little bit about how we can use analytics for the sake of improving analytics as a practice. And you know, I'm reminded of a definition of leadership that says that leadership is the capacity of a community to create its future. And in that sense, leadership is collective. Leadership is about collective intelligence as opposed to individual intelligence. And in this case, we were able to basically prove and develop tools to demonstrate that we can actually grow that and influence it. This work continues, and we are adding new methods, and we're successfully influencing the development of both large and small analytical organizations. So thank you for your time, and I welcome your questions.
Thanks a lot, Nabil. Really very insightful talk, and I really liked a lot the perception that you are bringing actually within your keynote, because during the previous days we have been talking more about the perception that is a little bit more related to technical aspects and beyond. But what you are showing here is more like also the human aspects of also collaborations, and looking to that dimension is also a key in order to ensure probably the use of best practices when we are building data science organization or building this kind of pipeline. And here I want to probably interact with you with two questions, while probably the audience are already asking many questions through the chat box. So what I want to ask you is first about this actually acceptance of these models, like where you show the importance of collecting data about the collaborations between people and their impact on the organization and so on, because I have seen with my team when we worked on this with several big companies, more on the software side, but it's exactly the same problem about the software analytics data, that we have seen sometimes some resistance to even accept some metrics. Like when we talk about expertise and innovation, it's sometimes a little bit hard to formalize it in a way that people will even accept it. Like some example for that, when we talk about development companies, like software development companies, some of them may say, hey, you are collecting data about the number of discussions, comments, who answered to the questions, who asked questions, but sometimes, or most of the time, I could meet with my colleague to solve the problem. So this kind of data may not exist on your side, but I was sitting next to him and I was solving the problem for him. So you may not capture this data for example, in your model. So what's your perception on how we can build a model that could be trusted by people and organizations when we talk about models for collaboration or expertise or innovation in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is really a critical question, and it highlights in many ways the approach we have taken here, which really has been more of a journey. What I shared just now is really one of the larger experiments that we've conducted, but it took us about really 2 years just to gain acceptance and develop trust in the approach. So initially, when we presented this idea, there was a lot of skepticism and a lot of questions, and people really weren't bought in. And so my recommendation, and what really worked for us, is to take it in baby steps. So we started initially conducting some experiments based on people opting in. And we started very small. We developed one experiment. People opted in because they were actually curious to understand how they communicated. And so with each baby step, we provided more evidence. We actually, from the very beginning, implemented checks and balances. So the data scientists who were actually analyzing these networks and developing the interventions and developing the AI capabilities to analyze the networks only worked with anonymized data. So the HR team actually developed the data preparation scripts, if you will. They ensured that all the nodes are encrypted, that, yeah, we can refer to a node uniquely, but the name is not in there, and there's no way to reverse engineer it. So this separation of duties from the very beginning and having HR be involved in that process created some credibility. And then as we took it and made it wider in its scale of implementation, there was definitely more and more support. The interesting is that obviously initially you have to be very patient, and you have to, I mean, one of the things that I did personally is that for the key executives in the organization, I would on a regular basis just send them research results, or hey, you know, company X is doing something similar, or company Y has done this type of work. So I was able to develop a network of implementations with other organizations, and I used that as evidence. But it took about 2 years to actually convince people to support this initiative. It is not easy, but this separation of duties within the organization helped quite a bit.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nabil. You actually answered partially my next follow-up question, which is actually what you just mentioned now, because our experience in general when we work on this kind of projects, we found that executives in the companies like yourself as a vice president understand the values of this type of analysis and type of projects and so on. But we found that when we talk to a lower level, like managers and so on, they may create this kind of resistance to actually, execute this kind of projects. And I really liked your approach that you said, and this is what we have seen in practice, that you show other companies, they did this and they are doing that, so why not to try it here? So what's your perception on that point, that, or your beliefs in terms of these projects in general are mainly championed by executive, but spreading, this process and the organization and showing the values is also a key in order to deploy it later and so on, and especially explaining to people why we are looking to this data, because sometimes I can give again the example of software companies, like for example, whenever a bug happen or something bad happen, and people, they try to take it as group responsibility rather than individual responsibility. So they may sometimes provide some resistance to even put this pipeline of collecting this data that you may use for your models. So what's your perception on this and how you dealt with this kind of situations?
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you the first time when I proposed this idea, the response was, "You want to do what?" And it was not a very pleasant response. People are really they've never done this before, so that reaction is understandable to a great extent. The key to remember here is that people need time to digest ideas, and you need to try different angles to basically try to convince them on the ideas. And I never took the initial response as a flat no, no way, we're never going to do that. It was a clear no, but I didn't take. I said, well, it's no for now, but let's continue the dialogue. And interestingly enough, I've used network science to help gain support. And here's what I mean. And literally, this is what I did. I brought my team together and connected with other individuals I know across the organization, and I said, and those individuals were supportive. So I went to those very few individuals who actually understood and actually supported this type of work. And I said, help me understand, if I wanted to map the network of influence of the top executives in the company, what would it look like? Who is basically open to these ideas and who is able to champion and influence others? And so we actually developed on a piece of paper manually, just a diagram of the network of the executives in the company. And basically they had two attributes. One is whether they are flexible in basically understanding in new technologies and maybe innovative ways of doing things. And the second one, whether we can rely on them to be champions for us. And so we identified those individuals, and over 2 years, we would be working with these individuals to help educate them more, to get their perspective. I mean, a lot of the ideas that we ended up implementing came from them. So basically, we created this ownership from these key influential individuals. And then the more we worked with them, the more they were able to become a voice for us. And over time, they were able to influence those who we could not influence on our own. And that's how it worked out. It was truly an implementation and network analysis to help us get to the point where we did this kind of mass network analysis across the organization. But obviously, initially, we did it with a pencil and paper. It was very manual and just based on our collective understanding of individual personalities. But it shows you that even a process like that has its own benefits. It doesn't all have to be massive amount of data. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks a lot, Nabil. Really very insightful. I mean, keynotes, and thanks for this bringing this perception, which is very important for organization to put in the right process for data science. So thanks again.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it.